Today's daf we're going to be learning is Gittin Daf Nun Chet. This week's learning is sponsored by Judy Schwartz in honor of her birthday, dedicated to the memory of my beloved mother, Sarah Rezel Bat Frida Sima and Mordechai Yitzchak Kraus, Shirley K. Teeter. As in our family, we give our mothers a present on our birthday. They did the hard work. A good line. Okay, now we're going to get started. Today, what we're going to do is finish the Agadot HaKorban. I already mentioned that. Again, we have a lot of extra content on these dapim because they're super fascinating and very relevant. So there's Shuli Mishkan's article in Flashback. There's On Second Thought of Yapi Clymer, which is specifically about a story in today's daf. And we're going to have Gefet, which is only going to go up some point, hopefully later today, also about the Agadot HaKorban and how they connect with the 3 weeks and what lessons we can learn from them. Okay, so we're going to start from the bottom of Nun Zayin Amud Bet. And then, by the way, we're going to get back to, we're going to finish at the end of Amud Aleph, this whole section, and then we're going to go back to our Mishnah, who could remember what the Mishnah was. The Mishnah was about the sikarikon, and then we're going to get to the sikarikon, and we'll remind you, we'll go back to read the Mishnah, and then we'll get to the Gemaras on that. Rabbi Bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, we're going to have a lot of numbers, like we did in the other dapim, where they seem to be counting how much of a loss there was, how many people. It's very much reminds us of when we talk about the Holocaust, and we always talk about that number 6 million. So it's the same idea of going back to trying to fathom the trying to grasp the numbers, how many, what it was. So they say there were 40 se'ah, that's a measurement, of p'tzutzei tefillin, of boxes of tefillin, shenimtzeu b'harugei rashei beitar, meaning that's how many people were killed because we could count by the number of tefillin that we found. Rabbi Yishmael amar, shalosh kupot shel arba'im se'ah, it wasn't just 40 se'ah, it was 3 boxes, and in each box there were 40 se'ah. The Manita Tan and the Bright, they had a different version, same amount, but a different way of saying it. Arba'im kupot shel shalosh shalosh se'ah. There were 40 boxes. Within those 40 boxes were 3 se'ah in each of the 40. Either which way, it's 40 times 3. It's the same number as the previous. Below pligi, hadareisha, hadidara. And they say there isn't really a machloket between either the 40 se'ah or the 40 by 3 or all these different numbers. There was one was tefillin of Rosh, one was tefillin of Yad, and that there's different, that if you go by the 40 se'ah rather than the 3 times 40, it all depends on, and then there's a big debate, which was smaller, which was larger. I'm going to leave that whole debate out for today because we have too many other things to deal with. But there's a debate about which was smaller, which was larger. And then basically there's no debate between the first source and the second two because they're talking about the different tefillin. One was Rosh, one was Yad, right? They were different. One's worn on the head, the one is worn on the hand. They're different sizes and therefore, right, the box is a different size. Amar Rabbi Asi, arba'im tabin moach. This is pretty disgusting. 4 kav of brain, smushed brains of children, actually, nimtzu al even echad, were found on 1 stone. Ula amar tisha kabin. Again, different variation. Was it 4 kav or was it 9? Amar Rav Kahana v'itei Mashila bar Mary, Mikra. What's the pasuk? Where do we get this from? Well, in the pasuk that talks about the punishment the Babylonians are going to get for what they did for us. Obviously, now we're talking about the first destruction. We started with Beitar today, which is Bar Kochva. We're going all the way back now to the Rishon. Again, all these midrash, all these stories are kind of intertwining different time periods. So now they say, we see from what they were punished, as we learned from Sota, and we know in general, midah keneged midah, they got punished in the way that what they did to us. So there it says, Bat Bavel hasheduda ashrei she'yishalem lach, you're going to get your pay back for what you did. Ashrei she'yochez v'nipatzet olalayach al sela. Okay, blessed is the one who's going to take you and basically crush your young ones on the rock, and that's a reference to what they must have done to us. B'nei Tzion ha'yikarim ha'mesulaim b'paz. Okay, so now there's a pasuk in Echa, which talks about their the B'nei Tzion, their mesulaim b'paz. Paz is gold. So now my mesulaim b'paz, right? I believe it's gold. You can correct me if I'm wrong. If you're going to say that they were all covered with gold, well, ha'amrei debei Rabbi Shila tarte mitkale istri piza nachut ba'alma chad beromi v'chad bekule alma. Okay, they say that there was a certain amount of paz that came down to the world, and it was 2 weights of history of these coins. And basically one was given to Rome and one for the rest of the world. So it can't possibly be that there was enough gold in Jerusalem to basically be covering means basically, what doesn't mean they were covered in gold, because they had tons of gold jewelry, but there couldn't have been that much. So it can't possibly be that that's what we're discussing. So Ella, now you have to remember also, this is in the destruction, right? It's talking about the loss. So it could be saying, oh, it's a loss of all this gold. They just had all this gold jewelry, but it's not possible they had so much because Rome in general had most of the gold and there wasn't enough to cover all the people, and therefore it must be something else. So now we're going to understand it in a figurative way. They made gold look bad compared to their beauty. Gold is generally considered very beautiful. In this case, the Jewish people were so much more beautiful than the gold. How do we know that? Or what's the story that's associated with this, and why is this such a tragedy? The first thing you have to know is that there was this belief, and we've seen this before, that if you remember, Rabbi Yochanan used to sit outside the mikvahs, so the women would see Rabbi Yochanan, he was so beautiful when they came out of the mikvahs, and then they would have beautiful children when they came home. They would give birth, they would basically conceive beautiful children. There was this concept that while you're having relations, or in that case it's before, but also while you're having relations, what you look at will be what you will conceive. Okay, it was this belief. So the Romans, would you take, and we saw this yesterday, the Babylonia de Gushpanka, it was the image on the signet ring, and they would use that as this beautiful image that they would write, which was probably made of gold, umasham she'ar sayu, and they would have relations. Mikam va'elach, from that point on, once they had these Jews that they took into captivity who were more beautiful than the gold, what would they do? Maite b'nei Israel va'asrei b'karei depurayu umashamshe. They would tie the Jews to the bedposts, and then they would have relations there, and that way the Jews would be there. They would have this beautiful person, and that would hopefully help them to conceive beautiful children. Amar lechal v'chavri. Now, one of these children who was used for this, or one of these people who was used for this, said to his friend, where did it say that this terrible thing was going to happen to us? Right? He was obviously suffering some post-trauma or something, right? And he said, where does it say? I never saw any of it. You know, I understand certain things it says in the Torah, these terrible things are going to befall you. It never says that anywhere. Amar lo, what do you mean? It says in the pasuk. This is the catch-all pasuk. It says, even things not written in this Torah are going to befall you. This is in Babylonia, chapter 28, when it talks about all the terrible things that are going to befall the Jewish people. It says, these are going to fall, right? The end of the pasuk is, Ya'alem Hashem alecha ad yishamdecha. Okay, God will put this upon you until you're completely destroyed. Amal, so now the friend says to him, Kama merchakikna biduchta plan. This is a funny conversation. How far are we from that pasuk in our learning? Amalei. We're only about a daf and a half away. We're almost there. We're almost at that pasuk. Amarle. So the other one says to him, the one who asked the question in the first place, who went through this horrible tragedy, said, had we gotten there, I wouldn't have needed to ask you. It would have been obvious to me when I read that pasuk that I would have read it. This is how we often read things with our own experience, right? Had I read that pasuk after I'd had this experience, I definitely would have said, that's obviously what this pasuk is referring to. Amar Rav Amar Shmuel mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Gam. My dichtiv eini olala l'nafshi michol benot iri. What's the meaning of this pasuk? Right, what my eyes saw from all the women of the city. Arba me'ot. We're going to go again. Yesterday we had, or I think it was yesterday, the 600,000 cities. Within them, there were 600,000 people in each one, and the same kind of idea here of 400 batei knesiot, 400 shuls. Hayu b'krach Beitar, we're in the city of Beitar again. We're back to the city of Beitar. V'b'chol echat hayu arba me'ot milamdei tinokot. Okay, so we have the 400, 400, 400, just like we had the 40 se'ah and all that. So 4, by the way, is another number. 400 is a number they used to love to use in stories. So there were 400 shuls in each city in Beitar. In each shul, there were 400 teachers. In each teacher of the 400 teachers, they have 400 students. What would happen? So now we're going to see. So you have this mass of people, And when the Romans came in, these people, the kids said, we're masses of people. If we each take a pencil, one of these or something like a pencil that we're using in school, we can stab them with it and maybe we can beat them. But when the enemy prevailed, what happened? They took, here, the kids were smart. They said, let's take our implements, what we have in school, and use them. Well, they took their books, wrapped them in them, and burned them. Okay, so it's kind of a little bit of a midah keneged midah, not in the sense of they got punished for what they did, but more like, they took their pencils, so the Romans took their books, surrounded them, and burned them up and sent them up in flames. And that's the terrible things that they saw, right, from all the people of the city, right? I saw this most horrible thing. That was this of these children being wrapped by their books and burned alive. Tanu Rabbanan. Maaseh Rabbi Yishmael ben Hanania. This is a famous story, and the reason why it's a famous story is because we already learned that you're not allowed to redeem captives for more than their value. We discussed that whole thing not so long ago. And one of the issues of the sugyot is this sugya. And that's when, if you remember, we talked about, we said that there's all sorts of answers given to how, in what scenario are you allowed to redeem captives for more than they're worth? And one of the proofs is from this story. So he goes he goes to a big city in Rome. There's one child. Tinok, by the way, in modern Hebrew, we use as baby, infant, but in Gemara Hebrew and in all these stories, it always means a child, not a baby. So there was a child in jail, he was told. That's going to be a big theme. We already had it. The Jews were beautiful like Paz. Now we're more than that. Now we're going to have this. I have another story where they were beautiful. You see a lot of words and themes that kind of go throughout the stories. We saw the meal and all those other stories the other day. Now we had the gushpanka that comes up in a lot of stories. We're going to see this issue of the beauty. So now we have this child. He's yefei einayim v'tov ru'ik v'tzotav sturim lo taltalim. He had beautiful curly hair. Halach v'amar al petach beit hasurim. So Rabbi Yishmael ben Hanania wants to find this child. So he goes to the jail, goes outside, Amal, and he starts quoting a pasuk. He figures if he quotes pasuk, he'll get answered by this child. Mi natan l'meshisai Yaakov l'Yisrael lebozazim. Who brought the Jewish people to this terrible state? Ana oto tinok v'amal halo Hashem zu chatanu lo. He says God did it, but it's our fault. We sinned. We didn't go in his ways. This young child has this, by the way, what does he have? A good perspective on things, right? As opposed to all the stories we saw before where there's misplaced perspective. Amal muftachani bo shemoreh hora'a b'Yisrael. Wow, he says. Rabbi Yishmael ben Hanania says about this child, he clearly has good potential. Ha'avodah, I swear, she'ein izaz mikan ad she'avdenu b'chol mamon sh'poskim alav. I will not move from here until I redeem him with as much money as I can get. I'm willing to spend anything. Now, this goes completely against the sugya that we saw in the other daf. Amru lo zazu misham ad she'pta'o mamon harbeh. Say he didn't move from there until he redeemed him from a lot of money. So, how do we rectify this with the other sugya? Again, this is used for number one to say perhaps he's a Talmid Chacham. Okay, so Talmid Chacham, maybe you are allowed to redeem for a lot more money. And some people say it's because it was a shat milchama. We were in the middle of a war, right, with the Romans. And in time of war, you could do it for any amount of money because in any case, they're going to take captives. It doesn't matter. We've seen many stories of captivity. It's not like it's going to encourage them to take more. They're already taking captives, in which case maybe we are allowed to. So those are two possible answers given, learned out from this story. And soon after he became a big leader in the Jewish people, Umanu Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. And this is Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. Sounds like a nice ending, happy ending, but it actually has a very tragic ending. And you might remember from one of the keynote, it's one of the most moving keynote, I think, which is this story we're going to hear about the son and daughter of Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. He was also a Kohen Gadol, we're going to see. And we have this story, I'll just kind of, again, we don't have enough time in Daf Yomi to do all these things, but there's different versions of the story in the Midrash, and like a lot of the stories we've seen, they come in different versions. The Bavli has a particular version, other stories have other versions, and the real interesting thing to do, which we don't have time for, is to analyze the differences between them and see how these traditions were passed down, but when they get written down in the books of Midrashim or in the Gemara, they have each place it's recorded has a bit of a different twist to it and a bit of a different, it could be somewhat agenda, right? You take the story to where you want to take it and you point out different details about it, or you have contradictory details. So you could say either it was just passed down differently in different places, or you could say that, let's say, for example, in the Bavli, they have a certain agenda where they're going with these stories, and therefore they particularly point out certain details. And you can compare this when you look at the Kina also, because it was written as a Kina based on these midrashic stories. So first of all, it's possible they had different versions in front of them. They took parts from there and parts from there. And your homework is basically, you're not going to have time to look up other versions of the story. At least go look when you're reading the Kina in Shul. So on Tisha B'Av morning, think about what we learned here and how the one who wrote the Kina changes it somewhat. Okay, so let's read. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav, Maaseh b'bno bito shel Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. So his son and his daughter, shenishbu l'shnei adonim, they got taken into captivity by two different masters. Liyamim, that's what happened. They were taken into captivity, and then people, they were given as slaves. Liyamim nizdavgu shnehem b'makom echad. So then it turns out both these masters happen to be in the same place. Zeh, they start schmoozing. I have the most beautiful, remember the father was beautiful, children were also beautiful. I have the most beautiful, beautiful slave. I have the most beautiful female slave. Wow, she's so gorgeous. Let's put them together. We'll have children and we'll split them 50-50. Right? One of the best things about having slaves is you can have them create more slaves for you. So they put them in a room. Okay, put them in a room. The room is dark. They don't recognize each other. This one sits in one corner. That one sits in the other corner. And they each start talking to themselves. I'm a Kohen, the son of Kohanim Gdolim. I'm going to marry a maid. He assumes it was like a gentile maid servant. He's right now. Remember, you can't marry a slave. You're not allowed to, right? And forget that he's a Kohen. Any Jew is not allowed to marry a non-Jewish slave. And basically he says, and not only that, there's two issues. Number one, there's halachic issues. Number two, he points out the fact that I'm a Kohen Gadol, right? It's a status issue. Like, this is horrible. So they both basically are saying the same thing in their own corners. And they cry the whole night. All of a sudden the sun starts to rise. And all of a sudden it was light in the room. And they realized who they were in the room with. And they fell on each other and they cried until they died. Okay, whether they committed suicide, how exactly they died of heart, of trauma. Okay, on these I cried. By the way, there's two issues here. Number one, first of all, their greatest fear wasn't true in the end. It wasn't a shifcha, it wasn't an eved, but it was actually probably worse because it's arayot, right? To marry your own sister is the worst of the worst, or to marry your own brother. And, for this, I cried. Amarish Lakish, Maaseh Ishachat Tzofnat bat Peniel Shma. This is on second thought. Rabbanit Yafi Climber is all about this. So there was a woman, her name was Tzofnat bat Peniel. Why was she called Tzofnat? Sha'akot Tzofin b'yofya. Litzpot is to look. Everyone looked at her beauty. She was, again, this theme. Seemed to be having that theme today about all these beautiful things, beautiful people. Bat Peniel, Bitosho Kohen Gadol. Again, we also have this theme of the Kohen Gadol. She was the daughter of the Kohen Gadol. Why Peniel? Panav El, right? His face was to God. Sheshimesh lepanai v'lifnim. And they say he served God on the inside, the panai being the bifnim. Right? Because he went into the Kodesh Kodeshim. Shinit alav shabai kol halayla. Okay, so now she gets taken into captivity and she's raped all night. L'machal l'bisha shiv'a chalukim. I don't really know the significance of this other than 7 is always this number they like to use. So he puts 7 robes on her, and he goes to sell her. She's got 7 robes. She's kind of covered up. Can't really see her. A very despicable, disgusting, ugly looking person comes to buy her. I want to see her beauty, right? It's kind of ironic. He's so ugly, but he wants a woman who's beautiful. Amar lo Rekan says to him, you empty person, You want to buy her, buy her. I promise you she's the most beautiful woman there is. Amar lo, he says, I still want to see. So he starts taking off her robes one by one. He gets to the last one. After he gets to the last one, she tears the bottom one out of, this is a sign of mourning. And she starts rolling in ashes. These are two signs of mourning, right? She basically realizes her life is over at this point. So she says, God, if you're not going to have rachmanut on yourself, on us, you're not going to feel bad for us, at least have mercy on your own name. Your own name is basically getting, dragged in the dirt. And this again is a pasuk we're going to quote that Yirmiyahu says in Sefer Yirmiyahu, Bat amichidli sak, people of my nation put on a sak, right? That's the sackcloth. Vit palshiba efer, here you have it, roll in the ashes. Evil yachid asilach mispei tamurim, you're going to make a mourning of individuals. Ki pitom yavo shoded aleinu, because the person who's going to rob you is coming upon you. Now, what does it say? Aleinu, on us. It should say on you. So alecha lo ne'amar ela aleinu. Why aleinu? Kivyachol alayva alayich b'ashadeh. It's saying it's really coming on both of us, meaning not only me, but also God. This is a reflection on you as well. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar, my dictive, another pasuk we're going to darshin, va'ashku gever ubeito v'ish v'nachalato. Okay, they oppressed a man and his wife, and a man and his possessions. Okay, here's a story. This is our last story for today. This is a good story of where everything kind of gets flipped. We have a master and his apprentice, and the apprentice has eyes for the wife. He was an apprentice that was learning carpentry. So now the master needed to borrow money. Again, you already see from the beginning, something's a little hafuch halafuch, right? Upside down. Usually it would be the student getting money from the master. Here, the master needs money from the student. So he has an idea. He says, listen, why don't you send your wife to get the money and I'll give her the money. She gave it lo ishto. So he sends his wife. She stays in his house for 3 days. You can imagine what happened there. So the husband comes after 3 days and says to him, Amar lo, hey Chani, where's my wife that I sent to you to get money? Amar lo, ani p'tarti al altar. He says, oh, what do you mean? I let her go right away. Total lie. But I let her go right away. I heard that young children came upon her and basically, I'm not going to say raped her because they were children, which means she must have been stronger than them. And therefore he's trying to tell him she wasn't raped, because if she was raped, then the husband wouldn't have to divorce her. He's not a Kohen. But if she did it willingly, which the assumption is if it was with children, she must have done it willingly, then he would have to divorce her. So he said, oh, I heard that she had relations with these children on the way, kind of attacked her, but she must have agreed. And Amar lo ma'as says, so now again, kind of strange. Why is the master asking the apprentice, what should he do? But he asks him, what should he do? Big mistake. Amar lo, if you're a shop, you want to listen to my opinion, well, you should divorce her. Amar lo, he says, she has such a high ketubah, I don't have the money. Remember, it started with he had to borrow money. Amar lo, I'll lend you the money and you can give her ketubah money. So he gets up, he divorces her. And of course, the student goes and marries her. And then what happens? He doesn't have money to pay back. The date comes where he's supposed to pay back the loan. He doesn't have the money. Amar lo. So the student says to him, you know what? You can be my servant and serve us. And then you'll pay back your way through your work. They would be sitting, eating and drinking. Right? Mamash horrible, right? He's got to stand there. And now let's go back to the pasuk. They oppressed a man and his wife and a man and his possessions, right? In the end, he lost all his possessions. He lost his wife. And now he's got to serve the person who's now married, who stole his wife from him. And his tears would fall into their cups, right? It's like they're drinking his tears. Okay, and in that moment, the Gzar Din was sealed. Okay, again, this is it's also what it's really saying in these stories is that because of individual sins, right, the whole nation ended up suffering because people didn't, and like you're saying, where were the courts, right? Nobody took responsibility for these actions. Some people say, it was 2 wicks and 1 candle. This is an obvious allusion to 1 woman, 2 men. Okay, that's the end of our stories of the Agadot Churban. If you want to go more in depth, there's stuff on our site that you can go more in depth into these stories. Plus, there's so much out there about them. Lakach min sikarikon, right? My favorite thing to do is really like what I mentioned about that story is to analyze different versions of these stories and see what comes out of the different versions, and that gives you a better insight into what it's doing here in our chapter. Because you can see, right, there's the skeleton of the story, and then there's the embellishments. And the way they embellish is really affects how, what the author here, why they were putting the story specifically here. So now we have to go back to the Mishnah and remember what the Mishnah said. So the Mishnah had different stages. So we're going to start from the words Ketzad in the Mishnah about how this din of sikarikon works. If the sikarikon, this is a gentile who comes, seizes your property, you're worried he's going to kill you. So he now sells it to somebody else. We talked about already, he sells it for less than its value because he got it for nothing. So he's going to sell it for a lower price. He sells it to you for a lower price. You come now and you want to buy it from me so that it'll be legit your land because you know it was stolen property. I sell it to you. I agree to sell it to you. Well, it doesn't mean anything that I agreed because we just assumed that I was scared of the sikarikon. And therefore I did it out of fear. And we had the same thing with the woman and her husband. If somebody went to the woman and bought her land and then went to the husband and said, I want to make sure I'm buying the rights from you also, because remember, all her land is really in her husband's possession while they're married. So that works. But if I agree to sell you the land after you bought it from my husband, the Mishnah's on Nun Ham Bet. And I basically agreed to buy it after you went to my husband first, you bought it from him, but since it's really my land, you have to buy it from me also. And I agree, we assume my agreement doesn't mean anything. It's just because I'm also scared of my husband. And it puts us in a certain time frame where people were scared of their husbands. So in that case, we don't believe the fact that I agreed to it, we don't take it as anything. So you didn't really buy it because you bought it from the husband who doesn't really own it, just like you bought it from the sikarikon who doesn't really own it. So you didn't buy it from me, so the land would go back to me in the original, okay? It's not meaningful. But what happened? Because of that, nobody bought the land back from the sikarikonim. And then they changed the halakha to say, if you buy it from the sikarikon, okay, then basically you give me a quarter, because presumably you got it for a quarter less, because remember, he sells it for less money because he got it for free. You bought it for less money, so you give me that extra money, and you get to keep the land. The third stage was that you have to wait first 12 months. I have rights. First they said, only if I don't have the money. And if I have the money, I can buy it. But if I don't buy it after 12 months, then we basically say that if I have buyback rights, but if I don't buy it after 12 months, then I lose my rights and you get to buy it back. And then it's yours and you just have to give me a quarter. So that's the basics that we need to know. We'll go through these again as we go on. So we're starting at the bottom of Nun Cherem Aleph. The fact that if I sell it to you after you bought it from the sikarikon, and then I sell it to you, and it doesn't mean anything, we say, because I was only doing it because I was scared. According to Rav, that's only if I said to you, how did I sell it to you? Well, I said, lech hazek v'kneh. Go and acquire it by chazaka. Okay, chazaka means that if you live in the land for 3 years and I don't complain, the land becomes yours. So if I tell you, go do a chazaka on the land, do some action, and also the way you do the kinyan is you can start working the land. As soon as you work the land, that's showing it's yours. Then it's true, I didn't really mean it. Aval b'shtar, but if I wrote a deed and a document that this is yours, kana, of course, why would I write a deed if I wasn't serious? So that already shows seriousness. And then basically, if you bought it from me and I wrote a deed, it's yours. Shmuel Amar, af b'shtar nami lo kana, ad sheyichtov lo achli. The shtar is not enough. I wrote the shtar, so I'm scared of the sikarikon. And therefore, what's the issue? Only if I write and I'm assuming responsibility for the land. Like if one of my creditors comes and takes the land, I'll give you back the value, I'll give it back to you. If I wrote acharayut, I wouldn't do that unless I was serious. And then it becomes yours. So starting now on the bed, Tanya Kavatei de Shmuel, we're now going to bring a bright to support Shmuel's reading. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Lakach min ha'isha v'chazar v'lakach min ha'ish mikol kayem. This is the case I reminded you of in the Mishnah, where if you purchased it from the wife, then you went and purchased it from the husband, it's fine. We assume the wife sold it to you fair and square. But min ha'ish v'chazar, right? We're not in the Mishnah. This is just the case that was mentioned in the Mishnah, and here we're in a bright. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is quoting it. Chazar v'lakach min ha'isha mikol batel. Okay, but if you bought it first from the man, then you went to the wife, and the wife said, yes, I'll sell it to you, we don't believe her. We assume she was doing it just out of fear of her husband. Now here's the part that proves Shmuel. Unless she writes in there that she guarantees the sale. She writes that she guarantees the sale, that's valid. Now that proves Shmuel. To which the Gemara says, okay, it's very nice to prove Shmuel from this, but all the more so, we should name it Havit Yufta de Rav. This should be a knockout to Rav Shita, because how could Rav say something against a Braita? Amar l'charav, no, Rav could answer, my achrayut nami shtar. When it says guarantee, what does it mean to guarantee? How do you guarantee? With a document, with a deed. So, and in fact, there's this concept we're going to get to, which is called achrayut ta'ut sofelhu. If you don't write a guarantee in a deed of sale, it's actually a mistake of the sofer. We assume you don't have to write, I guarantee the property. Any sale comes with a guarantee. So basically, we're basically saying that achrayut is synonymous with shtar. So therefore, it doesn't necessarily mean achrayut. It could just mean shtar. And even if you didn't write achrayut in the shtar. Tanu Rabbanit, second section. So the first section of the sikarikon was a machloket between Rav and Shmuel about whether if you wrote a shtar, would that be enough to say this actually to override the sikarikon halacha that we assume you didn't mean what you said. So it's just writing a shtar enough, or do you need achrayut? A guarantee. Tanu Rabbanit, next law. Lakach min sikarikon. Okay, now we're going to go through a case. I had the land, it was mine. Sikarikon comes and seizes it, and then you live on the land for 3 years. Now, 3 years, okay, you bought it from the sikarikon, you live there for 3 years. 3 years is what we call a chazaka. It means that you basically have rights to prove, if I don't complain, if you've been living in my property for 3 years, and I don't come and complain, this is all the third chapter in Baba Batra, I don't come and complain, we assume that it's mine. Even if, we assume it's yours. Even if you don't have a document showing that you purchased it, because we can assume maybe the mice ate your document, maybe you lost it. After 3 years, and I didn't complain at all, then you get to live there. You get to prove that it's yours. So now, what if you purchased it from the sikarikon, after the sikarikon seized it from me? You ate produce, you used the produce for 3 years. I didn't complain at all. Now, remember what the law is. Ultimately, from the end of the Mishnah, the law is that if you bought it from the sikarikon, we assume 12 months passed. First 12 months, I get rights to buy it. I didn't buy it back. You go buy it. You have to give me a quarter of the property. Now, if you were living in this land, now the question is, did you give me back the quarter or not? We don't know. Okay, so you were living there for 3 years, and I didn't complain at all. You now sell it to your friend. If the friend, now the question is, what does the friend claim? But if I come and claim I never got my quarter, I don't have any rights to complain. So now the Gemara wants to know, I don't have any rights to complain to the person you sold it to. That's specifically what they're telling us here. Notice they don't say, I don't have any rights to complain to you. Something's a little bit strange there. We're going to have to figure out. Hey, Chidami, what's the case? Now, the other thing you need to know is that there's a difference between a person who makes a claim, a definitive claim, and an unsure claim. So that's called in the laws of the Gemara, in the rules of the Gemara, Shema and Bari. Shema is maybe. That's when you come to court and you say, I think, but I don't really know, or I'm not sure. And Bari is when you come and you say, I know that this is the case. So that's going to be our question. If you come and you say, I know, okay, you're not you, sorry, the person you sold it to, this third person. Okay, or in our story, it's already the fourth. We have me, we have the sikarikon stole it from me. We have he sold it to you, and then you sold it to your friend. So comes your friend and me, and we're having this argument about the 25% that I'm supposed to get. So I have no claim on them. So now what's the case? If the friend came and said, Minach Zavna, which basically they explained to me, I know that you got your 25% already. if that's the case, he comes with a bari claim. I know, because when I bought it from, your friend claims when she bought it from you, you already told her that you gave me the 25%. Afilu rishonami. Well then, so I have no claim against you because you come with a clear statement and you lived there for you lived there for 3 years. In other words, your friend claims definitively, you lived there for 3 years and I didn't complain. So why didn't I complain all that time? I must have gotten my land. So basically there's two factors. Number one, it's a bari claim. Number two, there's the chazak of the 3 years. So, but if that's the case, why did the Braita say, I don't have any claim on the second guy? I wouldn't even have any claim on the first guy. If it was you who took it directly from the sikarikon, you also would be able to say, I know I gave you the quarter and I've been living here for 3 years and you didn't complain, and you'd have rights to claim that. So I wouldn't have a claim on you either. So that's why they're saying, even Rishonami, even the first person I would have no claim against. This seems to imply I don't have a claim on the second person, but I could claim with the first person. So what's the other option? You don't have a definitive claim. You say, I don't know. Well, ba'amar minach zavna, right? If you didn't say minach zavna, filu sheini namilo, well then you don't have any, if you have no idea, even the fact that they were there for 3 years isn't enough. If you don't come with a definitive claim, now this is very interesting. This shows this whole thing of squatters' rights of living there for 3 years is only if you say, I bought this. If you're saying, I'm not sure this is mine, then your 3 years doesn't help you. Okay, it's only if you say, I bought this. So if he doesn't come with any definitive claim, well, then we're not even going to believe the second guy at all. So what could possibly be this case? In this case, nothing makes sense in this bright. Amar of Sheshet, Lo'olam de Katayim. It really is that de lo Katayim. He didn't come with any claim. He doesn't say, I know. He doesn't know. Ukigon zen, this is a very interesting thing we're going to see in a lot of cases. Ta'anim liyoresh v'ta'anim lilokach. If either the friend is a friend who bought it from you, or is the son of you who basically inherited it and the father's no longer alive, basically in both these cases, you don't really know what happened because you weren't there when the whole thing happened because you're a new party. So the person themselves, if you, for example, claim, I don't know whether you took the quarter or not, we're not going to believe you. But if the person, this extra, right, this next person in the line who wasn't around at the time doesn't know, the court claims for them. They come either for an heir or for a buyer and says, we're going to claim for you that if it's been 3 years already and Michelle didn't complain, then she must have gotten her quarter. So Ida, so again, this person, we're going to be to'ain for them, your friend that you sold it to. But you, Ida, you're the one who bought it directly from the sikarikon, who was supposed to give me the 25%. Itain in, if you come with a definitive claim that you gave me the 25 and the 3 years have passed, you have a good claim. But ilo tain lo. But if you don't know, so I don't know, I don't remember, then we're not going to accept your claim at all, and we're not going to make a claim on your behalf. Right? The making the claim is only on the behalf of people that can't really make a claim, and they don't know, they weren't there. Tanu Rabbanit. There's other ways people could seize land that don't have this whole din of sikarikon. Sikarikon again means that it's not really a valid sale, because if I sold it to you, we're going to basically assume, we're going to get to your question, Sarah, soon. Okay. If I sold it to you, then we assume I was just scared of the sikarikon. But if the land was seized because because I owed money and they took my land, or meaning a gentile seized my land, or mahmat anparut, or just a thief came and stole my land, but it wasn't like I was scared they were going to kill me, then we don't have this din of sikarikon. Okay, which basically means that if you buy it from me, then we assume it's a good sale. I sold it to you. Or if you didn't buy it from me, like I can always claim that's my land and I can get it back. Okay, really what it means is that it's owned by me. And for anparut, you need to wait 12 months. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Sikarikon is 12 months. We just said this doesn't have the 12 months. And that it always really goes back to the original. I'm sorry, 1 second. 1 second. Let's check something. Sikarikon. Right, you don't have this 12 months and you have to give a quarter. Right. He gives back the land for free. He basically, if someone took my land for not the right, they seized it, basically it goes back to me. Okay, and we don't have this thing where we let you buy back the land and then you give me a quarter. No, you really have to give me back the whole thing. So now they say, but didn't you just say, Ein ba mishum sikarikon? So what's this 12-month wait? So no, that was a mistake. Hachi kamer. Sikarikon atzma tzricha sheyu bechodesh. Okay, there you have to wait 12 months and then it can become yours. But with the anparut, it never really becomes yours. Amar Rav Yosef, naktinan ein anparut beBavel. Rav Yosef said we have a tradition that there is no such thing as anparut in Bavel. So now they think that what he means is people don't seize property in Babylonia, to which they say, V'haka chazina diika. What do you mean? We see people seize property all the time. Ela ema ein din anparut beBavel. The fact that in anparut, normally, we're going to say the land always goes back to me. My taima, there is no such thing. What's the reason? This is very interesting. Below azil kabil, because there's normal courts in Babel. It's not like a country where anything goes and there's no real court system, which seems to be describing what there was earlier. But in Babylonia, they have court systems. And therefore, if I didn't start screaming when the guy took my land, if I would have screamed, the courts would have come and gotten involved. So the fact that I didn't, I must have been mochel on it and said, fine, you stole my land, okay, keep it. And therefore, if you buy it from them, then it must be I really gave up my rights to it. Whereas in a regular case of anparut, we assume I didn't because I assumed I wanted to get it back. But when the sikarikon takes my land, I have no assumption I'm going to ever get that land back. So I give up my rights. Now, I didn't exactly give up my rights because, again, the rabbi said I could still buy it back. But theoretically, the assumption is that I don't really have rights to it anymore. And that's why we allow you to buy it and you just have to give me the quarter. But if we think I'm actually not, if I want to get my land back, then it's still really mine. Now we're going to end with two more things. Gidol bar Eli, he's the funny guy who we saw, not funny, but I always think the story is funny, where his wife was knitting or embroidering when the guy came, and to give her the get, and then she said, come back tomorrow, and then he says, oh, Baruch Hatov Amitiv, and the whole thing is Eloi Daf Beget, and Daf Lamed. So another story about him. This story is seemingly unrelated. They're going to try to connect it and then say it's unrelated, and I'll already tell you the connection is very unclear. There's many different interpretations to what they're trying to say here. I'll try to go through it quickly because we're kind of at the end of our time. Kabel Ara Betaska mi Bnei Bag. Okay, the Bnei Bag are the people living in a valley. They used to give a tax, one collective tax for all the land to the king. Now, the king would take from everybody. So what would they do? They would basically divide it up based on what your size of land was. That was how much tax you gave. He got land from people that were going away, and they said to him, you pay our tax, and you can keep the produce while we're away. He made a little bit of a mistake. He gave the tax to the king for 3 years worth of that property. Why was it a mistake? Because the original owners came back after a year. What they say to him? Okay, you gave the tax for the first year and you ate. Perfect. But for the next 2 years, we're going to pay the tax and we're going to get the produce. You're off the land and you paid all this money. Tough luck. Okay, you paid it up front. That was your mistake. After the Kamei to Rav Papa, so he wasn't satisfied with that. He goes to Rav Papa. Okay, this is where it gets a little confusing. Rav Papa wanted to say that the people of the valley, not necessarily the first owners, some people say maybe it was the first owners. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but he wanted to basically claim that this guy could get his money back. Amar le Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yeshua le Rav Papa. In ken asita sikarikon. So Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yeshua comes and says, you're turning this whole thing into a sikarikon, but it's not a sikarikon. In other words, the reason why you think he gets his money back is because you're treating it like a sikarikon, which again, what happens, right? Basically there's many different interpretations. Who's the sikarikon in the story? Some people think he means the king is the sikarikon, and the king is kind of seizing the property. And because of that, we have to give the money back to the person who put out the money, the original. Now, again, we're calling him, he should get like the 25%. He should get at least his money back. Again, it's not so clear the connection here, but he says basically this is not sikarikon. The king wasn't seizing land; he was just taking taxes. It's not at all the same thing. And therefore, remember we had this. It's like putting your money on the horns of a deer, and the deer is going to basically take off with your money. It was his fault for putting the money down in the first place, and therefore he lost out.
Okay, so, right. Also, another reason you could say is because the king wasn't threatening their lives. Okay, we don't really know if that's true or not. Anyway, there's real lack of clarity here. Some people call the sikarikon the people, the original owners. Anyway, it's hard to say. Okay. Anyway, we're going on. So now we get to this quarter and has the quarter work. What are we talking? Machloket Rav and Shmuel. Amarav, Revia bekarka or Revia b'ma'al. You can either give a quarter of the land or a quarter of the money that he spent. Okay, a quarter of what was spent on right. Either you get a quarter of the land or a quarter of the price that was paid for the land. Shmuel says it's a quarter of the land, which is actually a third of the money that was spent. So now, what's the root here of the debate? Even though we went Rav Shmuel, we're now going Shmuel Rav. Shmuel held, it's all a debate, and this is how we get to the quarter or maybe third. It's all a debate, and here we get to a mathematical equation here. If the land was worth 100, how much does sikarikon sell it for? We already said, why do I get the extra? Because the assumption is you bought it for less than what it was worth. The sikarikon got it for free, so he probably sells it for less money. How much less? According to Shmuel, he sells it for a quarter less. Okay, which means if it was worth 100, he sells it for 75. Which means that what's basically a quarter of 100? A quarter of the land is worth 25, which is a third of the 75 that you spent. So it's a third of the money that you spent, which is a quarter of the value of the land. Rav says, no, the sikarikon sells it for a fifth less. So if it was worth 100, he sells it for 80, which means that a quarter, right? What's left? 20. How much is that? That's a fifth of the property, but it's a quarter of what you spent on it. So that's how we get to a quarter of the land or a quarter of what you spent. So that's the debate between them. Now we end with this Meitivei. There's a problem with this Braita because this Braita seems to go against Shmuel. Zo Mishnah Rishonala. This is going to be repeated from our Mishnah. This is the first thing. That was the second stage, right? That if you buy from the sikarikon, you have to give me back a quarter. But you get to decide whether you could either give me land or you could give me money. When does this work? It's only if I can buy it back myself. But I have first rights if I have the money. But Rebbe, the last stage was Rabbi Yishmael. This is just all good review of our Mishnah. If it was already 12 months and I didn't buy it back, anyone who wants to buy can do it. And now we get to the key point that we brought this. And then you get a quarter of the land or a quarter of the money, which shows Rav, not Shmuel. It's all a matter of perspective here, maybe a little bit of a play on the perspective from before. It's how you look at it. We're talking about after the money gets there, meaning we're talking about a quarter of the value of the entire property, not a quarter of what you spent. It's right. You spent 75, but the whole thing is worth 100. So a quarter of 100 is 25. So it's all a matter of the quarter of the ma'od is of what? Of the value, the monetary value of the land, or a quarter of what you spent. So Rav will explain it one way and Shmuel will explain it another way, and then this Braita is not a problem for Shmuel. Okay, so I know we're really late. I'll do a very quick summary. We finished all the Agada stories. Now we're up to, number one, we had a machloket Rav and Shmuel about what if I wrote a star? Does that change the whole sikarikon din? What's anparut? How is that different from sikarikon? There's no anparut in Babel. Why is that? Then we had the story with Gittin bar Eli. We tried to compare it, but we said it has nothing to do with sikarikon. And then we had this last part about a machloket Rav and Shmuel, whether it's a third or a quarter of the money that you spent. And that all depends on how much we assume he deducts from the price when he sells it. That's it for today. Wishing everybody a great day.